braving the weather. Can we say that? I mean, it's barely sprinkling out there. It's not cold. We know cold. It's not cold. It's just a little drizzly, so a little bit wet, a little chilly. That means you should just be perky. Yeah? I don't know. There's like two types of people when you get weather like this. People where it just energizes them. It's like, oh, it's a little fresh and it like gives me energy. And then there's the other side. There's the other person who's like, give me a book and a blanket and leave me alone. So who do we have? Who's energized by this type of weather? Okay. There's a couple of us and that's about it. And then who's like, I'm just ready for a nap. Yeah.
You have to ask if the book is optional.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. It's just a vessel to start slowing your roll into the nap, for sure. Yeah. Hopefully, I don't put you to sleep today. Today's going to elicit some engagement, especially toward the end of this, which you guys have been great at. So encourage you to do more of the same. Again, special welcome if you're joining on the video. It's going to be a good session today. I'm looking forward to this one. Maybe not quite as much as tomorrow, because this helps set some more framework for our discussion tomorrow. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. I've had a lot of questions over the last couple of days about some of the material that we've gone through, some of the resources, some of the graphics. That's the reason I even did handouts. I came into this week not planning to do any handouts, because what ends up happening when you put something in someone's hand is the level of engagement this way goes away, and the level of engagement this way increases. And I want us to be a community together. So I wasn't planning to go into this with handouts, but it was something that was obviously a value for many of you. So I gave you some more handouts for today, so you can kind of continue on. And if you didn't get handouts from the previous day, from yesterday, we have those as well, so you can add to your stack. Okay. I've also emailed a few of you some of those graphics as well. So again, if you want any of this now or at the end of this, if you're going to go back and rewatch the video and you want to have kind of the whole thing in a digital format, happy to get those to you as well. And then we'll try to get those to the conference, and they can maybe put a link to that resource with the video as well, so we can get that to you. Sound good? Don't hesitate to reach out. Travis, 5thGenConsulting.org. I'll get back to you. Okay? Okay, let me pray for us, and let's dive in. Okay. God, again, it's your day. It's a beautiful day that you've created, and we want to honor you in it. We want to have eyes that are open, and we want to have ears that really listen, are in tune to what you want for us for today. And so I pray that you just bless this time, that you'd bless this conversation, that you look down and say, man, this is a good thing that's happening here, and my people are growing, and they're learning, and they're honoring me. So that's what we want to do in this time and in this space. We love you, and that's why we're here. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, quick recap, because this is really good for me. So the recap is as much for me to like ramp up and roll in as anything. Okay, but this is a good thing for us to often do. So if you're not in the practice of like going back and recapping some of the things that happened maybe yesterday, or some of the things that happened if you lead a staff meeting, what the staff meeting the week before looked like, that's a great thing to do before you lead your current staff meeting, before you maybe have your next family meeting or budget meeting or whatever it might be. It'd be a good thing to go back and just kind of recap what was before. So let's recap the last couple of days. Session 1, I started off with this statement: no matter your age, position in work or life, your personality, your spiritual gifts, or whatever else you want to put on that list, I believe that not only are we all leaders, but leadership is in each of our calling. I believe that for you and over you. And here's some scripture that has shaped that in my life, and I hope it does for you as well. God created you. He created me in his image. What an honor, you guys, that is. And then he declared over us that we are very good. And he declared that we have hope and that we have a calling, and that's part of our vision for conference this year. And then as we live our lives worthy of that calling that he's given to us, We were actually his masterpiece. His masterpiece. And now we get to be difference makers in a world by leading in love. It just gets better every time. It does, for me. I hope that is something that you don't just hear or see on a screen, that you can chew on that and wrestle with that. And like I said, day one, my hope is that as we leave here, that's something that you believe, that is of value for you. And I get that that's all of this is easier said than done. Our world's moving at crazy speed. And we've all gone through life in a different way, especially when you look at generations. And that shapes so much of what we are leading into and how we live our lives and what we value. We've gone back to this graphic over and over again, and we'll keep doing that throughout. This is just a breakdown of the 5 generations that are rubbing shoulders with each other right now. That's it. And it gives us all kinds of good information, and some is true for most of the generation, and some is true for most of the people in the room, and others is maybe not quite so much. This is such a great resource to start, a tool in your toolbox, for sure. I refer to this often. We painted the picture a little bit better with the scene that we're living in. And this is not the scene for one generation. It's the scene for the 5-generational world that we're living in right now. This scene will look different in the future. I don't know what it'll look like. I'll have to adjust the talk for that one when we get there. But here's the scene, the speed that we're going. No surprise there. The convenience that's all around our entertainment culture. That's what we're leading in. Nurturing is such a huge part of the scene that we live in right now, and then entitlement, the sense of entitlement. And yesterday, we got to talk about our story, knowing and growing. Hopefully that's something that you remember. You know and grow, and the foundation of that, the cornerstone of that foundation is knowing yourself. You got to know yourself and grow yourself first. And one of the steps of knowing yourself and growing yourself is to just have some information about the generations that we're leading in, right? You have that tool as we look through that chart with the different generations and through the discussion that we have. Another great step and another great tool in knowing and growing yourself is to know your story. Know your story. Story bridges generation gaps like none other. I mean, I watched the video last night that was geared toward the kids, right? And I told you guys this a couple times, but I don't sit still well. I'm always kind of on the move, and as I'm prepping these things and spending time, with you guys, there's not a lot of movement necessarily. And so when I come for the evening session, I don't choose a chair and sit there. I'm in the back, and then I walk around to the side and kind of get to be with people who are singing over on one side, and then I go to the other side, and I don't sit still well, so I just move around a little bit. I like to do that. And as soon as that video came on, that story that was geared toward kids, I stopped and I was glued in, because story, man, it bridges generation gaps. That's so huge. Know your story, because that's an important part of who God's made you to be. He's brought you on a unique journey, and I can't stress that enough. You can't just simply say, yeah, I've gone on a journey and maybe I could share part of that story. If you really want to bridge a generation gap well, then know your story really well. And so we did this little exercise. I shared some of my story with you, 10 markers along the journey, 37 years, and just abridge that down to 10 little markers that are important about who I am today. And then we took 4 minutes, and let you just write down some of your markers along the journey. How many of you spent any more time with that yesterday? It's been busy, so I expect not many. Nobody. Spend time in it. Encourage you to do that. Really do. It's worth it. It is worth taking time. Maybe after conference, or maybe when you've got some rainy day drizzle before taking a nap, and whatever, right? Think a little bit more about your story. And this doesn't have to be something that you do in completion. You don't have to know the whole thing right now, but what if you just knew one part of it? What if you just committed to saying, there was this time in my life that was really formative. I'm just going to think through that and process that and be able to share that part of my story really well. That's a great start. That's how it started for me. I think it took a lot of years to fill out that type of timeline. 4 minutes isn't going to do it. So you got some homework. Don't skip over that. And we talked more about knowing ourselves and who God's made us to be through the 5-section profile, which is spiritual gifts assessment, the Enneagram, that's our personality types, right? Then our Myers-Briggs, which is how we perceive the world and how we make decisions. That's really important. Our temperaments, which is one of my favorites for sure. Can't stress that enough. How we interact with each other and how we communicate with each other. Such an interesting study. And then Strengths Finders, which is really our talent DNA. When you put all of those assessments together, it gives us a really clear picture of the different areas of our life that really make up who we are and how we go about each day, how we go about life. So important. Love that. Had a little bit of discussion about that yesterday, a little bit more last night, before and after the session that we had here. Let's just open it up. Any aha moments that have come from the last couple of days? Anything that you're like, I'm just not tracking with this part of it? Or any thoughts that you just love to open up to the group?
I like to know your story. I did three of those, whatever they are, six-sided, five-sided, whatever that is.
Way to go.
And it's pretty interesting when you write them down.
Unpack that. I would love to hear more about.
Well, I don't know. I'm not exactly here, but anyhow, I put down I was born in 1936.
Yeah.
So my first year goes up to 54.
Okay.
We were poor. My dad died, and I was the first one in my family to graduate from high school. I had 3 older siblings.
Wow.
And in those days, we were on a farm, and you had kids to work. And my dad would not let my 3 older siblings go to high school. They all went to 8th grade, Lutheran focused school. And anyhow, so it was hard times. My dad died before I graduated from high school. So I farmed with my mother for 2 years. So 2 years, I left the farm. My mother, we sold out because I was dating my former wife who passed. But so I left the farm. We got married. I went in the Army and spent 2 years in the Army. Went to tech school and got my FCC first class license, which meant I could work on 2 radios. And that was my career. During that period, we also had two children, and I joined Motorola. That was 56 to 66.
Wow.
67 to 80, we adopted my youngest son, and we moved 4 times, and that's where I quit. Now, since that time, we've moved again, and my former wife died from cancer, and then 6 years later, I married Phyllis. She chased me till she. But she's a great lady, just like my first wife. And now from here, I'm 84 years old, so who knows? So, every day is a blessing. We travel a lot. Spend the winters in Arizona. Got a cabin in western Minnesota, or western Minnesota mostly.
Yeah.
So life is good. My kids are doing well. My siblings, 2 of them were in the Army. They got their GED. Both of them went on to more school. My younger brother, no, he's the next one to me. He got his degree from Bemidji. Went to work in Wadena to be in a tech school. And so, who knows what's going to happen next. So I haven't put it in the last one.
Yeah. Can I just say thank you? Thank you, honestly. And from that 5 minutes right there, we've bridged the generation gap because I know a bit of your story. I can relate to some of your story. You said some things where I go, oh, that's a marker for me, right? And I know a bit more about your past. And if we're going to go into the future together, you know a bit of my past, I know a bit of your past. You can lead me and I can lead you. I appreciate that. I love that. So good. Any other ahas, any other thoughts, comments from the last couple of days? Yeah.
This is kind of related to this, but also kind of related to last night, because one of the things about building bridges is knowing people's stories. And one experience that we had in our church, we had an African American who came and shared her story to us as staff, just to understand a little bit of her background. It was just her story.
Yeah.
It wasn't, she was representing her entire people,
Yeah.
but it was just her story. And it helped me connect with her.
Yeah.
And even like with generations or racial issues or who knows what, it's the idea that if we don't know people, we can't connect with them and we can't build a bridge.
It's good.
Yeah. So this is, it's very cool.
Yeah.
My family is very disconnected. Stories aren't a real big part of that.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking, what a neat tool that would be to go interview my dad.
Yeah.
Like, let's do this. And,
Yeah.
we have a neat tool to, even on the first
Yeah, I've sat around circles with my family for years, and there's been times where, and most of the time, honestly, I've thought, man, this is really awkward when they say, well, let's share something about one of our family members. You know, when I graduated high school, I remember it was like, everyone say something really nice about Travis. And I'm sitting here going, I don't actually want this. I don't want people to say, you know, what they think is good about me or what they like about me or what they don't know about me or whatever. And it's been just kind of the thing for years. And what we've kind of shifted in our family a bit is rather than let's go around the circle and all talk about, you know, Sarah or all talk about Derek or, you know, man, Derek, tell us the story. What's going on? What's going on in life? Or what's, you know, what are things that you remember from the past? You know, we start talking about stories of getting together as a family reunion or taking a trip together or what, and pretty soon everyone's like just sharing stories together. And it's not about like everyone go around the circle and have just this little bit of time to dote on one person. It's, oh, you know what? Actually, our family, we really have done life together. That's a value. I love that about sharing story, for sure. Yeah.
I think as we're sharing for these 3 days, what's maybe my ahas and just kind of popped up is as we desire to share Christ and we meet somebody that maybe we've never met before, how critical it is to do what we're talking about, to find some commonality. Because I believe if people trust us, they then trust or tend to trust our Savior as we share our story and His story. And I think that's really a key part. It's kind of interesting. A couple of years ago, I was looking for somebody to lay some contingent from carpet to wood. And so I got a name out of the blue. So he called and we set up an appointment and he came. So we were just getting started. We hauled the carpet in, or we pulled the carpet out and hauled everything else in. And he said, so where's your wife? And I said, well, she passed away about 2.5 years ago. And he said, I lost my wife also. When I just had 2 little boys. And we spent 30, 40 minutes not talking about flooring, but about our respective lives and how all of that impacted us. And then just led kind of just step by step to talking about where he's going to spend eternity.
Yeah.
But I think the trust level is there. It has to be there to a degree.
Yeah.
And that's what you're sharing with us really drives.
Yeah.
As we share, I had that experience too. And then,
Yeah. Can I just say that's an aha for sure. And it's one of those that is going to come up tomorrow. This trust, this idea of trust and what this looks like generationally or in between generations, and how do we build generational gaps with trust?
We were walking back after this yesterday when we both kind of had an aha moment that each of these seasons in our life, I think we can attach a scripture to that either meant something to us or defined us during that time. And I think when you think about it, this is not just information or facts about our life, but it's also about a formation that happened. And transformation is happening through us. And whether it's a Bible, a character person, or a story, or maybe even just a singular verse, each one of our seasons in life we really could attach scripture to. That was kind of awesome.
It's not information, it's transformation. Did you guys catch that? Like, that's beautiful. That is an aha for sure. There's scripture that's associated with that transformation. Yeah? I love that. You read through the narrative of scripture and you just see transformation, right? From cover to cover.
It was interesting last night. God's kind of wired me to come along, man, and do discipleship with him and teach him. And a lot of that is the hardness of my life and what I've gone through. I've had cancer, lost my first wife to cancer, and remarried. So all those things that I've experienced in life, I can help other men deal with difficulties in my first marriage and things like that, where you can come alongside and be a disciple. So last night we met this young man. I think the mileage may not allow me to do that in his life, but asking him those questions, tell me about yourself. I asked him about his story by asking him questions, and the connection you get there was really quick, and I was really, it's like, that really worked.
Way to go. Way to go. Are you hearing, even just in us processing some of this, themes that are coming up? We all have unique stories. There's a lot of things that overlap in these stories as well.
And with me, I'm not saying I'm back in 1937. And what it did for me, it brought back so many memories that I'd kind of forgotten about. But as I was writing, these memories came back.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's a long time ago.
that's important. Yep.
And it also showed me that I like the different generation, because I like being part of each one.
Yeah.
And what we saw, and what we can tell them how what we saw and what we did.
Yeah.
I don't have trouble with that.
I'd say from my experience, honestly, there may be this misconception that's floating out there, and it may be true. Maybe I'm naive, or maybe it's the scene that I've created or circles that I've been with. But generational classifications, they may shape who we are, but there's a fairly high level of respect actually from each generation. There may be some things that we don't like about how the millennials do things, or how Gen Z are so into the technology, and we just prefer to make a phone call or write there's a communication styles, these are stylistic things. But when you talk to someone from Gen Z, you say, man, what do you think about someone who's from a generation that's different than you? What do you think about your grandparents? Man, they've got a lot of wisdom. They really actually love me, and I'm learning a lot about that. Or you talk about someone who's a boomer, and they're like, hey, I really appreciate what I've learned from.
Well, I can remember my mom saying to me, how can you stand that music?
Yeah.
And we each of the people today, the children that are born today, they'll go through the same thing.
Yeah, for sure. In the back.
I was going to say, I'm involved in a 5-generation ministry, Bible study fellowship.
Yeah.
And as I lecture weekly, one of the things I've done over the years is every lecture I share a part of my story as it relates to God's story.
Way to go.
And what is interesting is that my group leaders begin to share their stories within their groups. And somebody had commented just not that long ago at how transparent these women have gotten so quickly. But it comes because we've opened that door to share our story.
Yeah. Brian and I had a bit of a conversation last night about that exact thing, just the transparency, and how that may be natural for some, may not be natural for others. But definitely as you build relationships and as you bridge these gaps that we're talking about, man, that transparency just continues to get more and more. So good. I'm encouraged, for sure. 2 more. Let's go in the back and then we'll come up.
Well, yesterday it was affirmed yesterday why when we go to restaurants or something like that and we get the Z's and millennials waiting on us that they have tattoos.
Yeah.
I'll ask them, tell me a story about this tattoo.
Yeah.
Right? They love to share that. Next thing you know, is you're opening up the door about a conversation with the Lord Jesus, Jesus,
Yeah.
or they're praying with you when you're praying for your meal right there at the restaurant.
Yeah.
It's the greatest icebreaker.
Way to go.
Ever. Anybody with that body art.
Yeah. By the way, we can learn a lot from each other. That's one thing. That's great. Last one.
Yeah, my aha moment was when you brought up that the younger generation likes to work together. They don't like to work for someone.
Yeah, with,
They
not
like to
for.
work with.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I started thinking about different things about that. One of my struggles has been that I've worked with children in teaching young children for many years, ever since I've been a teenager. And in the last couple of years, for some reason, I just couldn't do it anymore because there seemed like such a lack of respect. And I just didn't know how to deal with it. But I think I've kind of seen, even with parenting and stuff, kids are kind of more like on the same level with their parents. And also like at work, and I'm kind of used to like this person's the boss and I'm their worker or whatever. So it's just, that was an aha for me. It made me think about this, that it's not just me going through this, but this is generationally how things are changing.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely, astute. If you're watching this on the video too, and you've got some ahas or some comments that you want to add, feel free to make a comment in the section below, and we'll try to get back to you on that as well, because you're a part of this community. Now let's talk about tomorrow real quick, because I know there's been a fair amount of interest of where we're going to go tomorrow, and that is, what is the role of the local church in a 5-generational world? What's the role of the local church in a 5-generational world? So if you're thinking about skipping tomorrow, maybe you should be here. It's going to be a great discussion. I'm hoping that in the midst of that conversation that we can also talk a bit about strategies. How do we grow young? What does it look like to program? How are we currently setting up our churches and our ministries? When I say churches, I mean organizational, right? Churches and our ministries, and is that the right approach, or maybe should we have some shifts in some of that? And it's going to be an interesting discussion. It'll probably take us for the last 2 days, along with some of this other mixed in there as well. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I was texting this with a couple of friends. I'm looking forward to tomorrow's session. I mean, probably more than any that we've had so far, and I've loved this. And that's not to discredit today, because today is more foundation to take us into tomorrow as well. We're going to talk about 4D, 5G leadership. 4-dimensional leadership in a 5-generational world, okay? So again, more just building on the foundation that we've had before. 4D leadership, by the way, is it's not something that I came up with. It's not some original thought. It's been around for a while. Some people know it as 360-degree leadership, and so you may be familiar with that as well. But 4D, 5G leadership is what I call it. And it's important, before we dive in to kind of unpack this concept, that we actually ask ourselves a few questions. Okay, there's 3 questions I think that we should ask ourselves before getting into the concept of 4D, 5G leadership. And here's what they are. Who are the leaders that you follow? Who are the leaders that you follow? And that may seem really simple to answer, but you may need to think beyond, kind of outside the box a little bit on this one as well, because these could be your supervisors and your bosses, right? That's the people that we maybe normally think of. They could be pastors. They could be family members of yours as well. They could be maybe experts in something that you're interested or in your field. So you may have to kind of broaden your idea of the leaders who you actually follow, okay? Second question is, who are your peers in leadership? Who are your peers in leadership? These could be, again, family members, could be co-workers that are maybe on the same plane of the org chart as you guys, right? That you work alongside. They may be colleagues from other companies, people who do what you do as well. Those are peers in leadership. It could be in your same generation or not. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And then, who are the leaders that you lead? Who are the leaders that you lead? Now, I believe we're all leaders, so that word leader is, you may not see them as a leader yet, but I hope that you can see those around you also as leaders. So who are the leaders that you lead? Again, these could be family members, they could be the team members that you supervise, they could be just those that you influence, maybe within your industry or your community. Think about that. Like you post something on social media and you have a follower on that, that may be a leader that you actually lead. Kind of interesting. Might also be someone that you mentor or someone that you coach. Okay, so just like yesterday, I think it's important for us to not just pose a question and then just leave it out there and move on. We're going to take our 4 minutes again. 4 minutes. And I'd encourage you, if you can come up with 3 names in each of these, that's amazing. There may be 10 names in one of these categories. I don't know what that looks like. But if you had at least 3 names in each of these categories, I don't want us just to take this as a concept. I want it to be sticky. And in order for it to be sticky, you need to associate someone's name, especially if you know their story. It's going to mean a whole lot more to you to talk about the actual concept. Okay, so take 4 minutes, write down some names of leaders you follow, the peers in your leadership, and the leaders that you lead. Couple more minutes. One more minute. What you thought through these 3 questions? Anybody that you put on that list, as you're just thinking through and kind of slowing the roll a little bit, as you're processing, anyone that you have on your list that's you just maybe wouldn't put on that list at just initial, blush of that, anyone that's outside of the box, you're like, oh, this person actually might fit into this. That come up for anyone?
My grandson.
Grandson, yeah, grandkids are great. Where'd you put them on the list?
Leaders that I lead.
Yeah. And do you think that your grandson would put you, if given these same questions?
I think so.
And where would he put you?
Leader I follow, maybe?
Yeah. Be an interesting little case study for sure. Anyone else outside the box? Someone who's outside the box that you put on here? Sometimes coaches will put like a team member or someone that maybe like a part of a support staff, an athletic director that they work with, or a personal trainer or someone like that who also leads the students that they lead. I mean, that's one that I've had before that's a bit outside the box as well. But as you spend a little bit more time on this, you may write down some names that are actually really primary connections of yours that you have influence in one of these 3 areas. So that's great. Encourage you to spend a little more time in that if you want. Here is 4D, 5G leadership, and this is the 4-dimensional side of it first, and then we're going to get to the 5-generational side, which looks the same, but really focuses on the generation. So let's look at the 5-dimensional. This is more your family units and your organizations, maybe your churches, maybe the teams that you work on in the workplace, that kind of thing. Okay, and you should have this graphic in your handout as well. It's this little arrow graphic with a little bullseye in the middle. This is 4D leadership. And it starts with knowing and growing. Go figure. Starts with knowing and growing yourself. You're right in the middle. Leading in starts with knowing and growing yourself, constantly expanding your wisdom, seeking to understand who God is, and seeking to understand who He's made you to be. Okay, that's leading in. We spent most of the last couple of days focused on that one. Okay, now leading up is an interesting concept for sure. One that when I was kind of presented with this years ago was a bit of an aha for me as I thought about leading up to my supervisor or leading up to my boss. Right? Leading up maybe to a lead pastor as I was in a support role. And that concept of leading up, it's just really been formative for me. Leading up starts with doing everything you can to know your leader's heart. Not just what your leader wants you to do, but know your leader's heart. So if you're thinking about your grandson, for instance, right? If your grandson sees you as a leader that he follows, it would be so much more helpful for him to know your heart than to know the thing that you just said, right? If you know your heart, then you can kind of unpack what you said in a way that makes a difference in his life. So if he knows your heart, you know what? Grandma actually she cares about me, and that's why she asks, why do you listen to the music that you do? Well, she cares. Maybe it's just, what is it about this that you like? Maybe she's just interested in it. Or maybe she's concerned because, I like how it makes me feel, but she listened to a lyric and that concerns her. But honestly, that just comes from a place of care. If he knows your heart. Okay? Same thing if you're working with a boss. If a boss is telling you something, giving you a directive, helping you, write your goals and your objectives and your plans, if you know their hearts, you're going to do a whole lot better job of understanding how you can get to where you need to go. Does that make sense to everyone? Do everything you can to understand the heart of your leader, not just what they want and what's behind that as well. And then as you do that, make yourself valuable to them, right? Make yourself valuable to them, not just by what you do, but how you can lead them. They need you to do this, by the way, as a leader, as a senior leader, and I need people to lead up to me all the time. I've needed that for the roles that I've been in. As you gain trust and influence, which we talked a little bit about here, it's an important thing, trust and influence, then take advantage of the opportunities that you have to influence your leader. The more that you gain that trust and more you gain that influence, the more opportunities you're going to have to take advantage of that. Does that make sense to everyone? Anyone have an experience with that you're like, oh, yes, here it is. That is absolutely leading up, or this was an aha that I had years ago about leading up to somebody. Anybody? Okay, we'll keep moving. Leading out. Leading out, and again, this is your peers. These are, these are people that are in that middle question that we looked at, your peers. So attach their name to it, but invest in those that you lead out to. Learn everything you can from them. some people who are on the same plane as you that you lead out to, maybe they're on the same plane of an org chart or in a family structure, you can learn an awful lot from them. You can learn an awful lot from them. So do that. Learn everything that you can from them. And then again, be valuable to them. Not just soak up what you can from them, but be valuable to them and show them their value. Show them their value. What if people did that to you? What if your peers did that to you? Every day you felt valuable to them, and you knew that you were a valuable part of your family or a valuable part of an organization from people who are on the same place in the org chart. Not your boss saying, hey, you're doing a great job. What if somebody who is another director of maybe a different department, and they come to you and go, you know what? I see what you're doing. Way to go. I'm going to put my head down, and I'm going to do my best to continue to lead in that the rest of that day. Absolutely. You could do the same thing to them. Show them their value. And then share resources and knowledge as often as possible, because what you're focusing on may be something very similar to what they're focusing on as well. Hey, I read this thing. Here's a quote that was an aha for me today. I'll share that with you. Hey, I put this graphic together. I know you're working on the same thing. Maybe this is helpful to you, right? So lead out to them and share that knowledge as often as possible. Function as a supportive team member, not a superstar trying to get ahead. How many times have we heard in organizations people who just run over everyone else in order to try to get ahead? If you have 5 people who are peers in an organization, and all of you are trying to just run over each other in order to get that next corner office job, that is not going to be a successful organization, and certainly not a healthy one. Instead, if you said, hey, how can I support you? How can we be a team together? When that corner office thing comes up, there's going to be 5 other people that you work with who goes, that's the person who deserves it. That's the person who's led well. It's backwards thinking from what the world has shown us for sure, especially in media, by the way, especially in the media that we've consumed. Lead out and do that exceptionally well. And then the last part of 4D leadership is leading down. And here's a little bit of a gut check for you. Okay? Lead down starts with modeling effective followership. By the way, I don't think followership is an actual word. Every time I write this on a document or put it here, spell check says, nope. No, it actually spaced it out on my notes. Follower and then ship. Right. So it's a word. We're making it a word. We're saying, Okoboji, we are now adding this to a word. But in order to effectively lead down, you should start with modeling effective followership. You want your people that you're leading, who you've been entrusted with and responsible to influence, to look at how you are led, and they're going to see that as a model. And that's how they're going to know how to start acting. Does that make sense to anyone?
I came to serve.
Yeah.
Be served.
Oh, come on. I love it. Absolutely. Be a great follower. And then this is stuff that we've talked about before. Show that you truly care. Ask about their story. Share your story. Don't just give directives. Don't just say, well, in my day we did. No, in my day, here's one of the things that we got to do, and I'm going to share a story with you. The concepts of what you're trying to get through to them will get through to them by sharing your story much more than just saying, hey, in my day, we did it a better way than what you're doing. Right? Right? Lead down in that way. Yeah.
I was just going to share something with you that happened in my office, which I've been retired now for 22 years.
Share it.
On Monday mornings, I was a Galvin Master. That was a special thing in Motorola,
Okay.
named after our president. And anyhow, I had my own office. Outside the door was another salesperson. And on Monday mornings, all he talked about was football.
Mm-hmm.
You know, both the Badgers and the Green Bay Packers.
Yeah.
And I came out of my office one day and I said, if you like to talk football, you go home, because we come in here to work, and you upset the whole office You know, that he still sends me Christmas cards, although I've never sent him one. And that's over 22 years since I've worked in the office.
You should send him a card. You should send him a card back. Moral of the story, write that down.
And I think the people in the office, they appreciated that someone did that.
Yeah.
Even his boss, he was, 20 feet away from him, didn't say anything.
Sure.
I just couldn't take it.
Yeah.
And maybe that's not leading up, but it's made me feel better.
We're going to move on from that statement and go from there. All right, we talked about primary connections, right? Primary connections. All the people on your list that you just put are primary connections, okay? Think about this idea, this concept of four-dimensional leadership as it relates to secondary connections. So if you were to make a list that you just, you've got 3 names in, for each of the questions, people that you lead up to, you lead out to, and you lead down, right? You don't change. So you're going to be the same, right? The primary connections are the 3 people in each of those categories that you lead, or maybe it's 15 or whatever it is. But let's just say you've got 9 people on your list. Those 9 people also have a list. Everyone's following. I'm seeing a lot of head nods, right? These are secondary connections of yours, is people that are on their list. Now, some of these may be the same as yours, so it may not be 9 unique names. You're actually probably on that list somewhere, often. You hope. Otherwise, you may not have the influence that you think that you have, right? With this person. Maybe you do. Okay? It may not be 9 more unique people. Maybe it's 8 unique people, or maybe it's 5 unique people. But those 5 people also have a primary and a secondary connections list. And you can see the multiplication effect that can happen, that your influence of the 9 people on your list, or maybe it's 25 people on your list. It just depends on your list. It could be over 100 people within 2 connection points of yourself. And that's a whole lot of responsibility to get this right. Somebody give me an amen. Oh, that's good stuff right there. There's a book by Dave Ferguson. He's with Exponential Conference. The book's called Hero Maker, and it talks about that multiplication effect. Hero Maker is a great book for you, for your church leaders, for your church. It's a great book.
I just don't want to let one thing slip by.
Come on.
You have on your list, but you didn't actually mention it.
Yeah.
It's your last statement. Empower them to lead, succeed, fail, and grow. And I think sometimes when we find ourselves in leadership positions, whether we want them or not, we don't want anybody to fail. Sometimes it's because we think it'll be a reflection on ourselves, truthfully.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's other reasons. We don't want them to be hurt or whatever, but for whatever reason, we're afraid to let people fail. And I think it's worth saying that that's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
Most of us can look back, as you're talking about telling our stories, probably at least one piece of your story is going to be some sort of failure, work, home, personal, whatever, somewhere in your life that really made a difference.
Yeah.
And if you can be supportive to the person that's there with you that you're trying to lead, it's okay,
Yeah. Failure is part of life. You are going to fail. You'll probably fail today. I'm going to fail today for sure. And the reason I know that is because yesterday I failed, and the day before that I failed. And if this is one of those aha moments for you, oh man, we got a lot of talking to do, right? You're going to fail. And so if you're leading people, by the way, this includes people that you lead up to, they're going to fail too. And you need to give them permission to fail. And as we lead our churches, by the way, and we put strategies out there, guess what? Not all those strategies are going to succeed. Right? They're not. They're just not. All of our programs, all the things that we put finances and resources to, some of those resources and finances, as much as we don't like to admit it, they're going to get wasted. They will. They're going to get wasted for the short term. But long term, they're going to be effect.
That is such a nail on the head because when I moved here, I'd never worked in a factory before, and I worked in a factory, and I was scared to death. I was afraid of making a mistake. I was just frozen. like when I.
How about that?
It was okay to fail.
Yeah.
Sort of maybe it's where I'm going to do what I needed to do.
Yeah.
And I had an incident at work where I crashed some parts and whatever, and at that time, God would just relieve me for some things, and I was like, it is what, all the leadership that came out, they were so, I mean, it was just a part of what happens, it's a part of it, you know, and.
Yeah. Can I just say, and we'll get to another question here, but there's a lot of negatives that come along with this scene that we focused on. There's a lot of positives that come with this too. And the nurturing environment that we're in now says to you, you can fail and you're not going to be dismissed. Now that may not always be the case, for sure. That may not always be the case. That may be a shift in your thinking, and it certainly isn't how it's always been. The current scene says we're in a highly nurturing environment, and so failure is okay. We've learned a lot from the generations on the past. Yeah?
I was just going to say, I think there's two levels of that. I think you can give permission for people to fail and tell them it's okay, but you can also model it yourself as a leader and then celebrate their failures and talk about failing forward. What I've found is anytime that I fail and I don't try to hide it, that gives them permission without even saying,
Yep.
You can fail and it's okay. But modeling it and celebrating it and moving forward through
Yeah.
failure.
Way to go. Failing forward should be on your notes. Should write it down. Fail forward. We're going to fail, so we might as well fail forward. We might as well lead those who we lead four-dimensionally in failing forward too, and modeling it, and helping them when they do fail, not have it be 5 steps backwards, but how can we help them fail forwards? That's so good. Do you have something?
Well, I was just talking about where you were talking about the primary people on the list,
Yeah.
the secondaries, right? And then just how that expands. But it's interesting too when you look at it going through the generations, right? Because one of the things that we're working on right now is teaching our grandchildren how to be grandparents. See that? So we're leading them on, this is something hopefully that you'll remember when your grandpa and grandma to that second generation past you.
Being intentional about that is not the norm. So way to go.
Yeah.
Way to go. Absolutely. Let's go there with the generational piece. The slide looks very similar. Let's just think about this from a generational type of environment. Instead of an organizational environment, this is where 4D and 5G kind of intersect. What does it look like to lead in? Well, pretty much the same, right? You don't change. That's why we spent 2 days really talking about how do you lead yourself well and setting the foundation there. But leading up can look fairly different. How can we lead up to generations that have come before? So we can learn from their stories. I hope that you hear that throughout this. Story is so important. Learn from the stories of those who have come before you. Their legacy matters. And what if they knew that you believed their legacy matters? Whether you're talking about one generation or more. That is a game changer. Talk about a generational bridge, like bridge that generational gap. If you walk in level setting the fact that you believe that their legacy matters, you just gain some trust and you just gain some influence and some respect. And now you can have some conversation. You actually get somewhere. That is so important. You want to grow from their wisdom. You want to invest your wisdom to them. What if you said, hey, in this conversation, in this relationship, you have wisdom and so do I. Let's share it. Now I've got more wisdom and you have more wisdom. That's a win-win. This is how we can lead up to a generation that's come before us. I'd say this, there's not a person on the planet that's learned it all, and most people know that. There's a few that maybe think they do, right? There's not a person on the planet who's learned it all. And from my experience, people that are in generations that are older than me, they're eager to learn from me. They're eager to say, what have you learned? What's the new thing? What do you know about this 5-generational stuff or about leadership today? Because when I was your age and leading, it looked a lot different than today. And you know what? I want to know what leadership looked like when they were my age, right? We've put this little tag on, that says, well, they're not really interested in. I think that tag can be just ripped apart and thrown in the garbage if we start here and just say, no, I'm going to bridge this gap by saying, I want to learn from you. And I got something that I hope that you can learn from me as well. Here's how you lead out generationally. This is an idea, but be a leader in knowing and growing your generational peers, especially as it relates to this generational idea and bridging generational gaps. Our small group is a great example of this. Our small group, we're all in the same life stage as each other. And we're all in the same generation. We're all in the same life stage as each other. We got young kids. It's almost a little chaotic if you're not in our life stage. If you're in our life stage, it's called Tuesday, But man, I've learned more from my peers, from those in my small group, than I have from any book that I've read or whatever. And I say the same thing about our cohort in seminary. John's back there right now. We went through our master's program together, and as much as I love the material that we went through, and as much as I love the lectures and the books that we read, I really did just soak all of that up. But I learned way more, and I've said this for years, I've learned way more from the people who I went through my master's program with than anything that I got, given to me. From a lecture to a book to materials. That's so important. You should be that for your peers, and you should know you are that for them. Again, talk about responsibility. Whew. We should learn from each other. Yeah? If you learn something as a maturist, and you hear another maturist who maybe hasn't learned that yet, share it with them. Don't be afraid to. Buy them a cup of coffee and share it with them. Yeah?
It reminds me, I had a conversation with my daughter, and speaking about he was talking about, trying to, invest into our grandkids. But I had a conversation with her, and one thing I know about parenting an adult child is that they take your advice as criticism. We refrain from giving them advice, but I sat down with her and I just said, you know what, let's talk about your kids. You tell me about them so that I can grandparent them,
wow.
Well. And it was just a sharing of wisdom.
Yeah.
And it was beautiful. She didn't get defensive. It was just, I didn't know that I was leading up, but now I see. That's what we were doing. We were sharing and building one another up.
Yeah.
She was helping me and I was helping them.
A lot of this is just language, by the way, to things that you're already doing. You just have language to go along with what you're already doing. You guys are crushing it back there. If you're doing half of what you actually say, man, I want you to be part of our family too. Let's talk about leading down just for sake of time, and we're going to keep going with some of this discussion because this is great. Leading down, I think one of the keys to bridging a generational gap that is below you. And this is true for me into a Gen Z, or for a baby boomer to a Gen Xer or beyond. I think this is so important, so don't miss this. But start with being curious. What if you just start with being curious instead of saying, I've got something to teach them, right? Or even, I need that person to just show me, because I'm sure our Gen Z people are going to get tired of helping us connect our device to our TV, or helping us get online or remember passwords or whatever it's going to be. I'm sure that they're going to get tired of it at some point. Hey, how do I use this thing on my phone, right? But instead, what if you just started by being curious? What are you up to? What are you learning? What are the things that are important to you? What are things that you value? And you ask what their value is. Well, it gives you an open door. If they're sharing their value, you could probably share yours at some point in that conversation, especially if you're great at sharing your story, like we talked about yesterday. Start with just being curious. Ask about their story, share your story. We've talked about this with a number of different people here over the last couple of days. But if you have a chance to mentor or to coach somebody who is in a generation below you, that is an honor, and take that opportunity 10 times out of 10. 10 times out of 10. I'm telling you, if you have the opportunity to develop somebody else, to coach them, to mentor them, whether that's a long-term thing, a short-term, couple of weeks, couple of months thing, or to do that for a conversation for 2 minutes, take that opportunity, please, if you walk away with nothing else. Please, please, please do that.
Something that happened to me quite by accident. I began to ask questions, what was it like? And all of a sudden, this conversation went on longer than most 8-year-olds will probably went through with an adult. But it was kind of fun to open it. It happened quite by accident, but I realized afterwards this was an opportunity to bridge a huge gap.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we had fun in the process.
Yeah. Can I just, we'll go back to this idea of not making this just a concept, but really applying it. What if we applied some of this 4D, 5G leadership in our churches? What if we went about setting up our churches or being intentional in our churches about having this model actually played out? Because I can't tell you how many times I've gone to a church, whether it's a church that I've been on staff at, been entrusted to lead, or have just gone to, attended, a church that I'm working with in a consulting environment. I can't tell you how many times, and I would say it's the majority by far, that I see after church the community that happens be segregated by generation. And that's natural. That happens. If you've got young kids and you're in the same type of environment picking up your young kids together, well, you've got things to talk about, right? Our small group, we'd all get together just by osmosis. It just works together. But what if instead we were really intentional about bridging generational gaps? I honestly think, you guys, that this is a game changer in our churches. That we will see churches grow because of this. We will see spiritual growth happen because of this. And not just for the younger generation. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking across the board. I think this is important.
What that would look like.
That's going to be tomorrow. I can't get there yet. No. Well, absolutely, can give some examples, but let's just open it up.
Can I share just a really sweet example?
Please.
We had a 94-year-old gentleman in our church. He just recently passed away, and he has interacted with my children since they were small. We used to make them go up and shake his hand Sunday morning when they were little tiny. And he has continued that, and he would read we're from a small town, so like our local newspaper, like it has, all the little kids in it and what their activities are. And he would have read that and have questions ready for them, knowing that they were coming up. And my daughter just went to college this year, and he wrote her letters at college, 94 years old. Just such a precious, thing that he really went out of his way to do that meant a lot. And has continued to mean a lot to my children.
Yeah. What other examples do we have? Yeah.
Just reading over the last few months and seeing how Moses led a generation that was not his own by the time they got to the promised land.
Yeah.
I think he's gotten really good at giving them a faith and a future hope. Like, look back, know your God, and this is all the things he's done for us. So now, take the next step into this new thing that you could be very scared of, and that God is going to be the same, and you can do this. Like, there was a mentoring there that worked. And then you fast forward to a generation later who didn't pass that story on to their kids. And they saw God differently, and their life story was very different. And they made life choices differently because that didn't happen. The way Moses had done for the first generation going into the promised land. Generations down the line, the stories got lost, and they lost their relationship with God because of it. So it's a weighty thing to tell your story well, where God's the hero of that story. I've only gone 3 or 4 of those little circles, and others have gone 5 or 6 circles, and I want to hear from you how God was constant in raising teenagers.
Yeah.
I just come along young moms and say, you can do this. You're
Yeah.
tired, sleep well, and
Yeah.
with your kids. And someone comes alongside me and says, you can do this teenage thing with your kids.
Yeah.
We want to do it well. The ramifications of not doing it well are serious.
Yeah. John?
Jump in. Thanks for letting me stand in the back.
You want to come up here? This is your spot.
Scott's a great friend, so I love this stuff. We got to learn this stuff together. One of the things I did when I was in youth ministry was look for senior volunteer youth leaders.
Yes.
In the senior age. And I heard we had a night where we brought all the seniors in, sat around round tables with the younger generation, and just had questions for each of them. Like, what is something from this generation that we were, and we just had storytelling time. And it was beautiful, and we gained about 3 new senior youth leaders from it, who were the most beloved youth leaders in the youth group ever. Because, you know what, everybody feels like, oh, young people should work with youth. No, that's true, but it's also not exclusive. That we had youth leaders in our youth group who were in their 80s, and they loved those kids, and those kids loved them, and it was the most beautiful thing. So there's an expression that just says, go to your youth pastor, or youth leader, and just say, hey, I want to volunteer, and you will be loved.
Yeah.
Especially if you grandparent those teenagers and you give them time and affection, they will return multiple.
Yeah, so many times when we recruit for student ministry, right? When we recruit for student ministry, it's like, well, who are our college age or young adult who were just in that season? And that's important, by the way. You need those people in your student ministry, absolutely. And then you also recruit, just kind of because it happens, your helicopter parents, right? Well, I'm bringing my kid anyway, and we got a little bit of a drive, and I want to make sure that they're not, being how they're at home, and they represent our family, and all those things. I was a teen once too, not that long ago, is what they say, right? And that's who our volunteer teams are across the board, from the West Coast to the East Coast and everywhere in between for our student ministry. That's who we go after, and that's what if instead we just said, hey, we need 5 generations present right here? What if they were kids? What if our teens said, or what if we said to our teens, hey, well, this student ministry is for you, but I want you to know you carry an immense amount of responsibility to model what it looks like to be a God-loving and God-fearing and a teen who is just trying to figure out, to this 8-year-old who's coming to pop the popcorn or to clean up afterwards or to be a part of your small group. Now, there may be places where that's not appropriate, with topics and things like that, but if you think out of the box a little bit, it would not be that hard to get 5 generations of volunteers present in a student ministry. Now expound that to the rest of your church. What if instead of having a seniors ministry where it's really a country club for seniors? Is this a bad thing? No, not at all. Our small group, like I said, is all people of this demographic for sure. But what if instead of just having a seniors ministry for the maturest demographic, what if once a month it wasn't about getting all the seniors together? What if once a month it was about bridging some generational gaps from there? I mean, game changer. There's a ton more of these, yeah.
I want to share something. In our Sunday school department, we try to do age group Sunday school classes, and worked for a while, but then after a while, the young people said, no, we don't want to do that. It was good, but we want to have older people in our classes so we can learn from them. So we switched it around, and the COVID thing, we still implemented it, and so on. Another thing too, what we do is, with the COVID thing, we haven't been able to do it yet, but we're going to do, is have a short video of a senior saint, and 2 or 3 minutes, and tell them about their history of where they met their wife and what they did and how they came to know Christ. And then also too have testimonies from younger people and how they came to know Christ in 2 or 3 minutes. In the beginning of the church service, we have a mission moment where we have a senior and a younger person moment also.
I love that. Yeah, when you can model it like that. Yeah, you can model like that in your service. Absolutely of value for sure. We did a video one time. So it was a church I was leading in a community where it was really a college community, right? There's 3 colleges in in town, and so we had a lot of college students who would come from quite a ways away, and a lot of times wouldn't be able to go home for Thanksgiving and I'm pretty sure it was actually around Thanksgiving. But one of the relationships that happened in the church, and I don't know if this was intentional or not. Let's just say it was, because it makes it a better story. But we had this college student who wasn't going to be able to go home pretty much all year. Right? Maybe once pretty much all year. And a family in the church who just basically adopted him and just said, for the year, when you need to do laundry, don't do it in your dorm. That's not fun. Just come over. We have laundry machines. And while you're doing laundry, let's just have you part of the family. If it's Sunday football, then let's watch football together. If we're all outside doing yard work, well, bring your stuff and jump in and do yard work with us. Right? And we showed a video that was so impactful about this relationship. And what it did is it gave people permission And it modeled what this could look like. And pretty soon a whole ministry grew out of it, of just adopting a college student. Every year when college would come into session, we would have these sign-ups. You know, if you're a college student, hey, just put your name on this list. You want this. It's not even an option. It's part of your admin part of thing, right? Okay, this is so good. And then we'd have all kinds of families from our church just adopt them. And sometimes it was more of a relationship, and sometimes it's a little less of a relationship. But it was such a game changer. That is an amazing way to bridge generational gaps right there. I love it.
I'd like to add, the conference has done a very good job of doing this very thing, I think, of generational gap. I think
That's good. Now I get that in every church this is not going to be possible. And by the way, making wholesale changes and just flipping everything upside down. You're like, all right, well, we just obviously don't have it figured out, so we're just going to flip everything upside down. We're going to try to just, that's not also probably the right strategy. It may be a little bit of a trickle effect. It may be like, a little bit of the drip from the faucet rather than the fire hose, right? So be strategic about how we implement some of these things. Model it. Start with maybe your small group, right? Talk with your church leadership about that if you're not in leadership with your church, okay? This is maybe not something that you just jump 100% into, but you start implementing. I do think that this idea, these concepts, can be game changers in our churches. And I think that most of the churches that I have seen and been a part of do a pretty poor job at this. And we can get better. And I think we need to get better. And we're going to look a little bit more about why we do that tomorrow when we look at what is the role of the local church in a 5-generational world. And how can we develop some strategies that can help us grow young? How can we develop some strategies to help us be effective moving forward? That's tomorrow. I cannot wait for this. Yeah.
I had kind of an aha moment when you're looking at this leadership pattern because I physically moved about 2.5 years ago when we got remarried.
Okay.
And that lead up, and part of that's my age in the process. The people that were my lead up are physically a long ways away. They don't connect with them very often. And it's like, I've got a part of my life that's missing now. And it's like, God, you got to find somebody that I can be mentored by. And so that was kind of like an aha moment. Maybe that's just the aging, and maybe some of these older gentlemen that are here can go, yeah, we're not finding that person in our life very much either.
Sure.
I'd like to get some feedback from some of those coming out here that, are you in that position in life where you don't have that authority figure, other than opening scripture and going to God or whatever?
Anyone else feel that?
Well, at my trip back in California, they asked me to be a mentor. We had a group of us. And we had a luncheon, and the girls that wanted to be mentored got up and talked about why they wanted to be. And then we got up and told why we wanted to mentor. And this one girl, I thought, oh, I'd love to mentor her. So I came home and told Greg, and he said, well, pray about it. Because what they did, they took our cards, and they would pray over all the cards, and they would put them together. And so we got there, and I got her. And she said the same thing.
Yeah.
When she heard my story, she was hoping I would be her mentor.
So good.
And we got a book, and our ages were different. And through this book, we had so much in common, but we looked at it a different way, and we told our stories.
Yeah.
And we're still friends. We still
Love
live
that.
together. She lives in Colorado, and I live in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
The next year, I got a real young girl, and she didn't want a book.
Sure.
She wanted to be mentored by doing things.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned so much about her, and she learned so much about me. And so it doesn't matter what age she was
Yeah.
mentored.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing, for sure. Yeah. Let's go back to this real quick. Anyone in a demographic, maybe it's baby boomers, maybe it's maturists, that you go, man, I don't have someone who is around me that can mentor or coach or come alongside me? Anyone feeling that? A little bit? I don't have an answer, by the way, on that. That may be something to process and to think about, and how do we go about that? Yeah, please.
I don't have an answer either, but just curious, even in my world, I'm wondering sometimes we have a presupposition to say someone is older is definitely more mature or has something to offer to me. But I'm wondering if just what you were saying is that if we see along our path someone that we like, whether it be modeling a good marriage or parenting or whatever, even though they may be younger, for us to go to them to say, hey, I'd love to have a cup of coffee with you and have a chat to get to know you. So sometimes I think we can have a tunnel vision to say, I need somebody older, because yes, they may have lived longer for life experience, but our youngers also have something to offer us as well.
There are some spiritually mature teens that we can learn a whole lot from. Absolutely. Now, if you're talking about life stage, you've got a teenager and someone who's a maturist, and how do I navigate this life change as I'm thinking about the things that are ahead of me? Well, they're obviously not going to be able to relate or lead you too well in it. But as far as spiritual maturity goes, there's nothing that says that this specific demographic of people is more spiritually mature or less than someone else, or has more wisdom than someone else. Yeah, it's good.
Or seek out and stay involved in ministries. I mean, in Bible studies, men's groups, women's groups. It's easy to stay home and think you've been through it all, but you force yourself to get out there. And I mean, just as the conference goes on year after year after year, who's in leadership teaching us now? Not my age group, not those older than I, but those younger. And so much to learn from all of you.
Well, I'll just say, and I've said it throughout the week to some of you, and to my wife when I've been talking with her, and friends from my small group who a lot of them were texting me, just yet this morning. But man, what an honor it is for me to be able to have this conversation, to share some of what I've learned on my journey, some of what I've focused on. Man, the discussion that's happened. It's not something I feel like I have to elicit, like, oh, come on, let's get discussion. You guys we're just sharing this time as a community together. And I've learned an awful lot from you. We're gonna learn a lot tomorrow too. That's our time, and I think they're doing a little bit of a tour in here as well. And so we're gonna clear out, but I appreciate you guys, and tomorrow it's gonna be a big day and a fun day for sure. Thanks.